headline that you'll be able to find at the Center Square, Illinois, is making its rounds, and that is Chicago tenant group calls for eviction moratorium amid ICE raids. And you can see this story from contributor to the Center Square, Glenn Menace, with that headline. We'll talk about that now here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, and you can wake up with us here with the Center Square and get the headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com, where I'm the editor for Illinois, and you can get even more here with the Center Square on YouTube. All right, so let's go to this story from Glenn Menace, contributor to the Center Square. Chicago Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez pushing for an eviction moratorium while immigration and customs enforcement agents remain in town. Of course, we've talked quite a bit about the ongoing efforts that immigration and customs enforcement have in enforcing immigration law in states like Illinois that are considered migrant sanctuaries because of state law prohibiting state and local law enforcement from cooperating with federal law enforcement to enforce immigration law. And you've got the DHS and other Trump administration officials saying, hey, we're flooding the zone because we're not getting cooperation. We've seen the clashes between protesters and federal officials and Illinois State Police having to come in to provide a barrier. Is that cooperating with federal enforcement officials, or is that just making sure that the streets are safe for the general public? You have the arguments about the National Guard and whether they're able to come in to assist in providing safety for those federal officials and for federal property. Those are ongoing court cases, challenging the president's authority to be able to do that, and also the president and the federal government suing the state of Illinois over its migrant sanctuary policies. Both things still tied up in court, but regardless, back to the story, this is causing some problems, Sigcho-Lopez says, and he's joining All Chicago Tenant Alliance, calling for helping non-citizens in the state of Illinois in Chicago with rental assistance. Here is Byron Sigcho-Lopez sharing some of his thoughts in a conversation he had with Glenn Menace.
Quite honestly, to put it blunt, is creating significant harm on people, including federal workers. I mean, federal workers that are not able to work. I mean, the many in furlough, including my wife. So we see the pain of people, federal workers, people who are not able to go to work, people who are not able to go out. And this is creating harm and economic losses for everybody. So certainly, I think that we need to, as other cities are considering, LA and other American cities who do not support the wannabe dictator, who have been attacked, and it's creating hardship, and economic hardship, people who cannot pay rent, cannot pay mortgage. And I do think that we need to consider both. One is a potential moratorium on evictions that is being considered in LA and other cities that are under the similar situation. And, we have a lunatic that is creating harm in American cities who don't agree with him. And we need to help people at least to survive this moment. And we also should consider, just like in the pandemic, rental assistance. That's what I've been urging Governor Pritzker, or mayors or county representatives to work together, just as we've done in other crises, to tax the rich, tax the millionaires. There's already a proposal on a surcharge at 3% that will generate $4.5 billion. Massachusetts did it at 4%. They raised $5.6 billion. I think that we could do something similar, and I think everybody agrees. The question is, where's the political will so that we can provide some sort of rental assistance? And I think we also should consider a moratorium on evictions, just given the severity of this economic attack and social attack on our city.
So again, you've got the Chicago alderman encouraging that there be not just a moratorium on evictions, but also a pandemic-era type rental assistance program for non-citizens in Chicago because they're afraid to leave their residence to go to work to make money to pay their rent. Because if they leave, they could possibly get caught by immigration and customs enforcement. And he says it's got people concerned and scared, and it's harming the economy. But this idea of giving rental assistance to non-citizen migrants being opposed by Illinois State Representative Chris Miller, who has also been pretty ardent in opposition to tax dollars going out to non-citizens. Here is Representative Miller in a conversation he had with Glenn Menace, contributor to the Center Square. Here's Representative Miller.
Well, one of the first things that occurs to me is that if you're abiding by the laws of the United States of America, you have nothing to be fearful about. And if you're afraid, I'm guessing that your conscience is bothering you and reminding you that you've done something wrong, because that's the only reason why you would be afraid of anything. I mean, I have two son-in-laws, one black, one brown, and they're legal immigrants, and they don't wake up being afraid of ICE or the police or anything, because they're law-abiding citizens.
So the downstate representative sharing that if you're worried about going out into the streets, you probably have a guilty conscience because you crossed the border illegally. And he then reflects on the question of providing rental assistance to non-citizens.
Plus, if these activists are concerned about them paying their rent, the activists, why don't they just step up to the plate and pay their rent for them rather than complain about it?
We'll see where that goes in Chicago if the conversation continues to move towards providing rental assistance to non-citizen migrants. But clearly that is something that's made the rounds, and people debating it on social media and sharing their thoughts on what exactly should happen with immigration enforcement, rental assistance, or a moratorium on evictions, similar to what they did during the COVID pandemic. And Chicago facing a $1+ billion deficit in their budget. How would you pay for that? You heard Sigcho Lopez suggests taxing millionaires an extra 3% or 4% and getting billions of dollars that you could tap into for what he says is rental assistance for non-citizens.
That particular one? Oh, yes, I was an advocate for the bills, protecting our immigrant communities across the state.
Well, this bill is another example of the problem that exists in the operation of our General Assembly, where we have a bill that does one thing, and in fact has broad or even unanimous support, and then is changed in a moment's notice, sometimes with just an hour's notice, and ends up being passed in one chamber and sent to the other chamber that same day, passed again with just an hour's notice. Basically what I view as a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the 3 readings rule in our state constitution.
That is State Representative Patrick Windhorst talking about the process by which a bill passed the Illinois General Assembly in fall veto session in October, just in hours, changing a bill that was originally focused on POW and MIA Recognition Day, prisoners of war and missing in action. It was a bill that passed unanimously in the House back in April. Never passed the Senate, but the Senate in October, and the last day of scheduled session, decided to gut and replace it and make it a migrant sanctuary enhancement bill. All right, welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, and you can wake up with us each and every weekday morning for the latest here as we break things down for you in the land of Lincoln and how you are impacted as a taxpayer. So greatly appreciate you being here each and every weekday. And you can join the live chat where people are pretty conversational about the issues that are impacting the state of Illinois. And be sure to go to thecentersquare.com where you can sign up for the newsletter to get the latest headlines in your inbox, and be sure to share this up with your friends as well as we, again, break things down here in the land of Lincoln to get you what you need to know and on with your day. All right, so let's go ahead and get on into this. If you go to ilga.gov, you will find that you can kind of follow along with legislation. So go to the website, the Illinois General Assembly's website, go to Report and Inquiry, click Legislative Reports. There you will see Bills Pending Governor Action, and you click there. This is a report of all the bills pending governor action. So they've been sent to the governor, and he's got 21 bills on his desk. Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker does have a bill signing ceremony today that's going to take place this morning later on in Chicago, and deals with access to vaccines. So we'll hear a little bit about that. But as you can see, he's got a slew of other bills on his desk. One in particular that we're going to focus on today is the POW MIA Recognition Day. This is House Bill 1312, and it's nothing to do with prisoners of war or missing in action recognition. It was changed in the last day of fall veto session to be a bill enhancing migrant sanctuary policies. We talked about this previously when it passed, and you had House Speaker Chris Welch having a debate about the term illegal immigrant with State Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer. And again, you can go and find that story at thecentersquare.com. And even House Speaker Chris Welch breaking down what exactly this bill does on the House floor. And again, go to thecentersquare.com. You'll be able to see that with that article back in October and November when we
Not
wrote
some
about
people,
that.
all people should feel safe at our hospitals, which will be required to adopt safeguards concerning law enforcement's presence at healthcare facilities, at courthouses, where those ordered to appear in court for jury duty, a traffic ticket, or other businesses will be protected from extrajudicial abuse and detention. And on our college campuses and daycare centers, which will now adopt policies to protect students and children in their care, including protection against disclosing a family's real or perceived immigration status.
So that real or perceived immigration status line appears throughout the bill, impacting a variety of institutions, but it also allows for private right of action to be brought against individuals for assisting federal immigration enforcement officials or violating the Constitution. Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked before the holiday break if he's going to act upon this bill.
You're anxious? You need to know the answer right now? It has not.
Was not sent to his desk then.
Typically, it takes a little time to enroll these bills and have them delivered to me. There were a fair number of them actually from veto session, so no doubt they'll come soon. But we've had, I don't know, one or two holidays in between, and probably it'll be early December before, or late November probably, before I see some of them. That particular one? Oh, yes, I was an advocate for the bills, protecting our immigrant communities across the state.
So the governor anticipated he's going to sign this bill. And again, go to ilga.gov and look at the history of House Bill 1312, which, as we stated, started as a POW MIA Recognition Day to be observed in honor and remembrance of the men and women who, as POWs, have suffered captivity in foreign countries while in active service to the United States, and as MIAs have been recognized as missing in action in a time of war during period of hostilities. Provides the governor shall, in the governor's annual designation by official proclamation, that's some portion of the third Friday of September, be used for solemn contemplation and plight of members of the United States Armed Forces who have been held prisoner of war and members of the United States Armed Forces who have been missing in action. So again, this was a measure filed by State Representative Maura Hirschauer initially, and then it's got some amendments that were provided. But you could see here, back when it was filed in January of 2025, earlier this year, you had a lot of co-sponsors sign on, right? Representative Dan Ugasti, a Republican, signed on to it. It was a bipartisan effort, and it passed unanimously back in April as the POW MIA recognition bill. But then you go further down, and you see that it got to the Senate eventually. The Senate had its first reading. The Senate had a second reading in May, but it never had a third reading before they adjourned at the end of May. But then come October, it was put on consideration for third reading. That then allowed for Senate President Don Harmon to file an amendment on the final day of scheduled session, October 30th. They heard about it, had a committee hearing about it. All within hours, it was brought up in the Senate and passed. So the Senate amended it with the migrant sanctuary status updates the last day of fall veto session, months after the House had passed a totally unrelated bill. So you can see the trajectory of this. And again, it gets to the House eventually, and the House passes it on October 31st on partisan votes. So you could see all of that passing 73 to 33 to suspend rules, partisan votes. Then they have the amendments that are passed, 75 to 32. And then you ultimately have the measure now on the governor's desk. So that's kind of the trajectory of this bill. For more of what exactly it does, again, here is Republican State Representative Patrick Windhorst, who opposed the measure on the House floor when it was brought up Halloween morning.
Well, the bill does several things. I think it's fair to characterize it as an expansion of the Trust Act in a lot of ways, just in general. But specifically, it creates civil liability for law enforcement officers, both federal and state, that are involved in activity that is found to be in violation of either the Constitution or state law as it relates to immigration enforcement. So in broad scope, it's an immigration related bill that expands the Trust Act.
So Windhorst, in the conversation I had with him yesterday, also delved into an amendment to the measure that does impact qualified immunity.
Yes, initially when the bill was filed and working its way through the General Assembly, there was a provision. Actually, it's called the Illinois Bivens Act, which references a type of federal lawsuit that exists for violation of constitutional rights. But it would say that any person, law enforcement or not, any person who while conducting civil immigration enforcement engages in a violation of either Illinois or the United States Constitution would be subject to civil penalties. Initially, when the bill was being heard in committee, we had a discussion, and the speaker presented the bill and noted that there was not a qualified immunity protection provision. That was later added with Amendment 5. Qualified immunity is a doctrine that says that an individual is not responsible or civilly liable for a violation of constitutional rights unless that constitutional right is, quote, clearly established, unquote, under the law, meaning there needed to be a prior court decision where the court says that this is a violation of constitutional rights. That way people are on notice. If they commit that action, they are subject to suit. So by including that does provide some protection to law enforcement that did not exist previously. To me, it wasn't enough to support the bill. I believe the bill goes too far. But it did provide protection that law enforcement was looking for.
And again, this is something that the representative says happened all within the span of a handful of hours, and he goes into some in-depth, explanation of, it's the issue of possible civil litigation against law enforcement that could be brought forward, but it's also the liability for several key institutions in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, this bill touches on a wide swath of our society, as you mentioned, dealing with higher ed, hospitals, and childcare specifically. And it's going to require these entities to have policies in place when they are engaging with law enforcement, in some cases beyond the immigration context. For instance, and the policy provisions related to the hospital, hospitals will be required to have a policy in place with how they will handle law enforcement on their premises, regardless of the purpose, immigration or not. In fact, so much so that a hospital is to contact their legal counsel when law enforcement is on the premises, which, as I'm sure you know and others who are hearing this know, law enforcement is often at hospitals completely unrelated to immigration. If they're bringing someone who has been involved in a criminal activity or an accident into the hospital for treatment or evaluation, or if a correctional officer has an inmate at a county jail who needs medical care, or they're brought to a hospital, all these things would trigger those notice requirements that are unrelated to immigration. And it does present penalties to hospitals, child care centers, and our colleges and universities if they do not either have the policies or abide by them. putting them at risk of those penalties that don't exist prior to this bill.
Again, State Representative Patrick Windhorst with that understanding of this particular measure, and he says that it's really not going to help the overall debate about federal immigration enforcement in the state of Illinois if the governor signs this expansion of the state's migrant sanctuary policies.
Well, I view this, as I said, as an expansion of the Trust Act, which I think is having a detrimental impact on immigration enforcement in our state. Of course, that's what the purpose of the law is in a lot of respects, not only the bill we're talking about, but also the Trust Act. And it's going to make for some of the issues we're seeing in the city of Chicago, where law enforcement isn't able to work with federal law enforcement, isn't able to work with local law enforcement in that immigration enforcement measures, where it's creating scenes that are chaotic and it's causing issues for those who are enforcing federal law. And I think this will cause an expansion of that, where our local law enforcement officers aren't able to help the federal officers. One other provision of this bill that it talks about any person designed toward federal immigration enforcement, but our U.S. Constitution, of course, has a supremacy clause, which will mean that this provision, as it relates to federal law enforcement, will quite possibly, in fact, likely be unconstitutional, meaning that the only law enforcement officers who are going to be subject to penalties under this will be our local and state law enforcement, which I feel creates another problem. And we're subjecting our law enforcement to these possible penalties at a time we're having a difficulty in recruiting law enforcement to work in our state. Now, as it relates to how the Trump administration and state government will interact, I think it's just going to be one more barrier for us to see the law enforced as it should be in an orderly way, and will potentially create other arguments to be made that actions taken by the federal government beyond the normal law enforcement actions would be constitutional or allowed by federal law.
Again, that's just a conversation about what kind of impacts this expansion of the state's migrant sanctuary policies will have on the overall debate of federal immigration enforcement in the state of Illinois and in the city of Chicago. But again, as we started off, this particular bill that's now on the governor's desk, and he can sign it at any time, it started off as a POW MIA Recognition Day law, passed unanimously out of the House in April. Had a chance to pass the Senate, never came up during the spring session. And then during veto session months later, on the final day of scheduled veto session, it's gutted and replaced from no longer being about honoring members of the military who are prisoners of war or missing in action. It then focuses on expanding the state's migrant sanctuary policies. Windhorst says this is yet another example of that gut and replace, he says, is a violation of the intent of the three readings rule in the Illinois Constitution for legislation.
Well, this bill is another example of the problem that exists in the operation of our General Assembly, where we have a bill that does one thing, in fact has broad or even unanimous support, and then is changed in a moment's notice, sometimes with just an hour's notice, and ends up being passed in one chamber and sent to the other chamber that same day, passed again with just an hour's notice. Basically, what I view is a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the three readings rule in our state constitution. We see this often done with the budget, and unfortunately also large pieces of legislation that have broad impact like this bill does. It's a bad practice. That makes for bad law. And I think this is another example of a bad practice making bad law. This bill should have been one. We had 6 days in the veto session. If this is the legislation the majority wanted, we could have started with day one and worked its way through under what I would consider the appropriate or proper channels of passing legislation. But instead, we have legislation that is major, broad, wide-ranging, passing with just a day's notice or sometimes less than that.
Again, just a handful of hours notice when it comes to this particular piece of legislation. So it's not the only one that's on the governor's desk that the title of it doesn't really match the contents of it. Again, if you look at the reports generated at Illinois General Assembly's website, ilga.gov, that was the Prisoners of War Missing in Action Recognition Day, House Bill 1312, that is now a migrant sanctuary enhancement bill. But another one that's got an interesting twist that's now on the governor's desk, it is the sanitary food preparation bill. All right, so 1950, Senate Bill 1950, sanitary food preparation. So it was filed by state senators and amends the Food Preparation Act, provides that if a food distribution facility is engaged in the collection, storage, packaging, or distribution of food to consumers, then that facility is subject to all provisions of the act. And it goes out and spells out more. That measure ultimately amended to be the medical aid in dying bill, or as others may call it, assisted suicide. So it's the End of Life Options for Terminally Ill Patients Act. This measure came up on the last day of veto session. Again, after gutting and replacing, a measure about food safety turns into an assisted medical aid in dying or assisted suicide bill that is on the governor's desk now, and he can enact it. And Right to Life, a organization that opposes abortion, they also oppose this legislation. They point to concerns that county coroners have raised about oversight and transparency when it comes to this issue, and they say that they're going to deliver petitions to the governor's desk. The governor has 30 days for when it was sent to him on November 25th to either sign or veto it. If he doesn't act, then it automatically becomes law. So we'll see exactly how this plays out.
That is my sole responsibility in this moment, is to protect the people of this city. And here's the thing. We're asking corporations, 3% of them, to help us balance the budget with essentially an amount of dollars that account for about 1.6% of our overall budget.
They want higher taxes, but can't provide safety. They want more money, but can't protect our children on the way to school. They demand billions, but can't secure a single train car.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson continues to push for tax increases as the city is looking to finalize a budget before the end of this month. But what's exactly going to happen, especially as more criticism of Chicago priorities are laid out? It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning here for the latest and how you are impacted. Yes, you're probably listening in downstate Illinois, not in Chicago. But Chicago is a major economic hub. It's also a major user of state tax dollars, and you've got policies that the State House continues to pass, including the sweeping of interest on the road fund that's going to go to the Chicagoland area for mass transit. That was approved in October. The governor has yet to sign that, but obviously that's coming down the pike. But you've got other issues concerning public safety as well, but it's going to happen with the budget. Go to Illinois, the page for the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, editor of Illinois for the Center Square. You can get this podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Search for Illinois in Focus and you'll be able to find it. All right, let's get into this. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson yesterday holding a pretty sweeping news conference, and he talked about Chicago's overall budget and how he's still looking for revenue.
Well, look, they're going to have to find 34 alders who can compel working people that they're going to balance the budget off of their backs. They're going to have to go do that work. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the tools that are available to me to protect the working people of Chicago. That is my sole responsibility in this moment, is to protect the people of this city. And here's the thing. We're asking corporations, 3% of them, to help us balance the budget with essentially an amount of dollars that account for about 1.6% of our overall budget.
So there's a lot of questions as to what exactly are going to be the tax increases imposed on Chicago residents, right? I mean, he's talked about a head tax that would charge a tax for every employee of a business that has more than a certain number of employees every month. And if you've got 100 employees, it could cost you $21,000 a year. Or something to that effect. A lot of pushback on that. Even Governor J.B. Pritzker saying, no, that's not a good idea. There's other questions about, is the mayor going to propose a property tax increase? Is the mayor going to agree to an increase in garbage collection fees? Is the mayor going to agree to an increase in taxes for sports betting? And what about the prospect of Chicago allowing for video gaming, like, the slot machines, the video slot machines that the rest of Illinois has, but Chicago doesn't? So is that going to possibly be worked in before the end of the month? Who knows? But Mayor Johnson, he says that he has not yet seen proposed cuts from aldermen, saying that the city needs to find efficiencies.
Well, we have not received a formal proposal from anyone at this point. We've started this process well back in April. And I guess some people are just used to cramming. Our team, we work nonstop, constantly. We consider ourselves responsible stewards of the people of this city. And so, this sort of rush cram work is something that, quite frankly, is, I believe the residents of the city of Chicago deserve more than that.
And the mayor saying that he is fighting, quote, for the working people and wants higher taxes on higher earners, and says he's even willing to starve himself.
I have put more skin in the game in the fight for public accommodations than any other elected official in the history of this city. Name one outside of me that have starved myself, that have taken arrests, that have gone on strikes, that have led organizing campaigns across the city and across this country to ensure that our public accommodations are actually fully supported.
So what's that mean? We're going to see a hunger strike from the mayor if he is pushing for more taxes, and especially going to Springfield and talking about a surcharge on millionaires or a progressive income tax or something to that effect. He says that is very much in the cards.
We will lead the charge. If Springfield is not willing to do it for whatever reason, and they have their reasons, then we'll go first. We've even gone as far as to say, if you don't want to do it, give us the authority to do it. But if you look at, since we've been talking about not only challenging these large corporations, but the ultra-rich to pay their fair share in taxes, the Speaker of the House recently, he also said he supports a millionaire's tax. He said it. So clearly I'm not by myself.
And is that going to be a conversation had at the State House about going after higher earners to make them pay more of a percentage of their wealth? You've got the opposition in Chicago coming from Chicago Flips Red. Social commentator James McCoy speaking Monday and criticizing Chicago priorities.
The mayor claims that he wants to make Chicago the most affordable, safe city in America. I don't know anybody who feels like Chicago is affordable. Chicago, year after year after year, is getting less affordable, especially for homeowners. In a few years, if we allow this crisis to persist, there will be no homeowners, all right? Nobody will own anything in Chicago. Chicago is not being more safe. Chicago is just, the crime is not being reported. That's just what we know. And we know this because we can go outside and see it with our own eyes.
So McCoy talking about how Chicago is not affordable and Chicago is not safe. And you've got some examples of that, especially being social media gatherings that are unsanctioned, leading to shootings happening outside of holiday festivals in downtown Chicago. Not on the west side or the south side, but downtown Chicago. And Mayor Johnson saying that, it's a focus that needs to be put on the parents of these young people.
And here's what I've called for, and we will continue to call for. We need adults and parents to absolutely know where their children are and where they're going. These unsanctioned gatherings have proven to be detrimental and harmful. And that's why we had not only additional police officers out there, we had CVI workers. It's why I'm working within my budget to make sure that we are redirecting young people towards positive interactions, whether it's with BAM or WOW or many other of community-based organizations who are working hard to provide alternative outlets for young people. So I'm willing to work with anyone who understands the respective assignment. And the assignment, of course, is we gotta hold people accountable. Adults, parents have to know where their children are.
The mayor also asked yesterday about public safety, and in particular, that story of the individual charged with setting somebody on fire on a CTU train, having dozens of prior arrests where he was released, and even the electronic monitoring program in the city and the county raising some serious red flags. And it's all part of the Safety Act. It's all part of no cash bail. Somebody charged with a crime, if it's not in that net of detainable offenses, they can be let go, put on ankle monitoring pending trial. But is there really much follow-up when that ankle monitor goes off the geo-tracked area that it's allowed to be at? There's been indication, and even the Cook County Sheriff has been really vocal about opposing the ongoing electronic monitoring program, and Cook County prosecutors also evaluating it. But Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson asked about it and seems to indicate that there's more work to be done, he says.
I think that's something that is going to require all of us to continue to debate and, put on our thinking caps around how do we make sure that tragedies like this don't happen again. I still hold to my firm position that this was a severe breakdown. And it's incumbent upon all of us, the state, the county, the city, municipalities around the state, to come together to figure out how we can make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
That incident, obviously horrific, and the mayor, when asked about it last week, said that it was an isolated incident. But critics say that was a cold response. Independent reporter William Kelly at the news conference yesterday asking for the mayor to respond to critics.
What do you say to those people, Mr. Mayor?
Well, first of all, what I've said from the very beginning is that this was a tragedy, and this woman is fighting for her life. And as I've said repeatedly from a question that was raised earlier, that individuals that clearly have a violent past, as well as mental health issues, should not be on the streets of Chicago. And that was a failure and a breakdown in our system. And it's incumbent upon all of us to continue to support this family and continue to pray for her. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And again, as tragic as this is, it is a reminder of how much work we still have to do.
And then the Q&A kind of devolved from there to talk about ratings and how many people reporters actually talk to, and the criticism back and forth. Johnson even criticizing that reporter, saying he has small equipment and that his questions come off as racists, and then they moved on to another reporter. But earlier this week, Chicago Flips Red Vice President Danielle Carter Walters sharing that the Johnson administration is failing.
Just last week, a woman was set on fire on the public transit. Brandon Johnson refuses to acknowledge the real cause or hold the right people accountable. They want higher taxes, but can't provide safety. They want more money, but can't protect our children on the way to school. They demand billions, but can't secure a single train car. And they spend our tax dollars to fight President Trump in court to stop him from sending the National Guard to handle what they can.
What will the city of Chicago do with the budget coming due January 1st? Are they going to increase taxes? Are they going to change their priorities? How is this going to play out? Of course, we'll keep an eye on that. Tax dollars go to a lot of things. One of those being safety nets for society, right? It's food assistance, it's utility assistance, it's a whole host of different programs meant to help people when they need it the most. And one particular program that's been the focus of a lot of people on all sides of the issue is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And should fraud be rooted out so it can be secure and given to those who need it most? And how do you go about rooting out that fraud? Well, apparently there's debate about that now. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us here each and every weekday morning for more, and get the headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. Just click newsletter and you can follow through and stay up to date with what's going on, not just in Illinois, but across the country. So yesterday, you had Governor J.B. Pritzker at an unrelated event announcing Illinois 250 USA celebrations. So America's turning 250 years old next year, and Illinois is going to play a role in a whole host of things, from highlighting Illinois' history in the United States. And yesterday, by the way, was Illinois' birthday. It was I can't remember which year it was, but 1818 is when Illinois became a state, on December 3rd. Anyways, so the governor held an unrelated event talking about all the events and things that are going to be happening. But he was also asked about Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program funding, especially on the heels of Brooke Rollins, the USDA secretary, sharing this with President Donald Trump on Tuesday.
Very much a part of the national conversation during the Democrat shutdown was SNAP reform, food stamp reform. When all of America saw what so many of us know and have been working on, but when you have so much rampant fraud in a program that 42 million Americans participate in, now a big good piece of news that I hope is written about, since you became president, about 800,000 of those 42 million have moved off of food stamps, which is hopefully the plan, with better jobs, higher wages, etc. But still, when we found 186,000 dead people's Social Security numbers being used, 500,000 people receiving benefits more than twice. We had a couple of people receiving benefits in 6 states. In February of this year, we asked for all the states, for the first time, to turn over their data to the federal government, to let the USDA partner with them to root out this fraud, to make sure that those who really need food stamps are getting them, but also to ensure that the American taxpayer is protected. 21 states said yes, not surprised. 29 states said yes, not surprisingly, the red states, and that's where all of that data, that fraud comes from. But 21 states, including California, New York, and Minnesota, the blue states, continue to say no. So as of next week, we have begun and will begin to stop moving federal funds into those states until they comply and they tell us and allow us to partner with them to root out this fraud and to protect the American taxpayer. As Joe Biden was working to buy an election a year ago, he increased food stamp program funding by 40%. So now as we continue to roll that back,
All right, mute, unmute. Okay, so there you go. The button was sticking. So Rollins saying that they're going to start withholding these funds from states that don't cooperate, and that's cooperation coming from Illinois. Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked about it yesterday, again at that unrelated event. Here he is saying that the federal government's trying to weaponize food.
The truth is that the administration does not have the ability to do this, and I think it's reprehensible to use food and food insecurity as a weapon to try to effectuate a policy that is completely unrelated to it. Look, as you know, they've been gathering databases that are, people should deserve privacy, right? Whether they're a SNAP recipient or not, it should not be information that gets gathered by and then disseminated by the federal government. But, you know, we're obviously following all the rules around SNAP. We always have. Nothing that they're requesting would reveal anything that's untoward about the program. And again, this is all about effectuating a policy that's bad for the United States, bad for the state of Illinois. All we're trying to do is feed people, and everybody in the United States deserves to have a decent 3 squares a day. And SNAP is really not very much money to provide to people. I don't know why they're going after this program. You want to go after fraud, I mean real fraud. There are lots of people who are Medicaid providers, Medicare providers out there that the federal government should be looking into to ask, you know, what kind of fraud that they're perpetrating. And indeed, that kind of fraud gets exposed every once in a while. But it seems to me they've taken people off of that job, out of the FBI, and then other jobs like the DEA and ATF, all to move them over into immigration work that is ineffectual, inappropriate. We need comprehensive immigration reform, not hunting people down based upon the color of their skin. So I reject the idea that the federal government is doing something that's good for the country by gathering these databases, because we know that's not what it's all about.
So the governor seeming to not want to comply with federal law. I mean, it's federal law that they have to turn over this data. And they're going to start withholding funds from Illinois if Illinois doesn't cooperate. Now, how much are we talking about in Illinois? In fiscal year 2024, the federal government's fiscal year, Illinois got more than $4 billion from federal taxpayers to give SNAP benefits to 1.9 million people in the state of Illinois. And our error rate on those payments was 11.5%. And 10+% of that was, again, mostly it was overpayments. And who's that money going to? You heard Brooke Rollins say that they're getting information from Republican-led states that's allowing them to find and suss out the fraud, waste, and abuse to ensure that people who really need the money is going to get the money. The governor says it's not a lot of money. $4 billion is a lot of money. What happens if that's cut off from the state of Illinois? Can Illinois cover that? I highly doubt that. Look at the state's finances. I mean, the governor not too long ago said that there needs to be 4% reserves found in all state spending. And you've got the potential of hundreds of millions of dollars that the state's going to have to pay if that doesn't correct its SNAP error rate, and a whole host of other funding issues as well when it comes to the SNAP issue. So how all that's going to play out with a governor who's saying that they've cooperated in the past, and what about this new effort to try to root it out? And he says it's not a lot of money for an individual. It depends on, of course, the house and the household size and the individual's eligibility, but it's about $200 a month in some cases, less than that. But again, getting it to who needs it the most, right? I mean, that seems to be the effort from the Trump administration, is ensuring that they root out any fraud, waste, and abuse. But, the governor seeming to read between the lines here and talking about immigration reform when he's asked about SNAP benefits. Is that because Illinois is giving food subsidies to non-citizens? And how's the taxpayer, who is also, somebody who may need SNAP benefits, feel about that? So we'll obviously be watching this closely, but it's not the only thing when it comes to, your tax dollars and how they're used to subsidize others and create a so-called safety net. We've got this from Cook County, and this is the Cook County Promise Guaranteed Income Pilot. And this is something that apparently they're continuing now. So the Cook County Promise Guaranteed Income Pilot provided unconditional, no strings attached, $500 monthly cash payments to 3,200 low to moderate income families in Cook County for a period of 2 years. Cook County held an open application period between October and November of 2022, with payments starting going out in 2022 of December and December of 2024. And then they talk about how they had a program continue throughout the year, and now it looks like they're going to be moving forward with the program again, drawing Governor J.B. Pritzker's reaction after our reporter Jim Talamonte, the Center Square up in Chicago, asked him about guaranteed income. Is that going to be a focus that the state government's going to push forward with?
No. I think that, you've heard the old expression that states are the laboratories of democracy, meaning, that states can try things out that ultimately sometimes end up being federal policy, something good. Municipalities and counties trying things out to see how they work, I think is not inappropriate. It's not a policy that we're looking at doing for the state of Illinois, but on the other hand, sometimes things that you don't imagine would work do. I haven't looked at the data, so I can't tell you whether the program is an effectual program. I am concerned. I think that we should be providing jobs for people so they can earn a good living, and the dignity of work really matters. And so I guess I would throw that into the question of, is a universal basic income type program going to work to give people the dignity that they want? Ultimately, though, what we want is to make sure that people have the basics that they need in life, right? A roof over their heads, the ability to buy the groceries that they need to survive.
So again, the governor being asked about that yesterday, and a potential opponent to the governor in the 2026 gubernatorial election, Ted Dabrowski, he put out this statement on X about the, quote, no strings attached guaranteed income program. He says Cook County's recent decision to continue its no strings attached guaranteed income program into 2026 is a prime example of reckless, misguided welfare, and the Pritzker administration helped make it possible. He said low-income residents under the program received $500 per month with no conditions, no work requirement for the able-bodied, and no citizenship requirement. The monthly payouts are disregarded when determined eligibility for other welfare programs. So if you're in this pilot program from Cook County, that doesn't count towards whether or not you get other subsidies. It's just on top of that. Thanks to the 2023 ruling by the Pritzker administration that money from Cook County's program isn't taken into account when determining state cash, SNAP, and medical eligibility. So they carved that out. That ideological ruling made the fair distribution of scarce resources to the needy impossible. Now, Dabrowski says he supports assistance for those who are temporarily down on their luck or unable to provide for themselves, but he says when he's governor, he will do all he can to make welfare programs trampolines that bounce those able to work back into the workforce. And he says that he will put citizens first. No more social welfare programs for illegal immigrants. Normalized government dependency, as Cook County's program clearly seeks to do, is destructive at a time when Illinoisans, especially in Cook County, are already reeling from huge tax increases. Our compassion must be directed to promoting real solutions like more jobs, better schools, and more economic opportunity, not blind bailouts or handouts. So there you go. You've got Ted Dabrowski chiming in on the guaranteed income program as well. Now, a conversation we had with a Democrat state legislator last week, Chicago Heights State Representative Anthony DeLuca, he says he's got a program, a bill that would look to curtail federal or state tax dollars from guaranteed income programs.
Yeah, I did file it's House Bill 60, and I didn't file this recently. This was from some time ago, and it would basically say that it would prohibit taxpayer money from being used for a guaranteed income program or a credit to provide an incentive, a financial incentive. So it would prohibit those type of programs, and it gets back to the same issue about managing tax dollars. People are paying a lot of money in property taxes, certainly in my area. Affordability is a huge issue. They feel like they're getting nickel and dimed by government at all levels, and when they see these type of guaranteed income programs, I'm hearing from my constituents a tremendous amount of concern. So what the bill does, it doesn't say you cannot have a guaranteed income program. You can have a guaranteed income program. You just can't use the taxpayer dollars to do so under my legislation.
I asked him if nonprofit groups would be able to do this.
Sure. And the unit of government could manage it.
So again, DeLuca has this bill. He's a Democrat. Can he get Republicans to sign off on it? Can he get enough Democrats to join Republicans and himself to get this thing across the finish line at the State House? We'll see if they come back in January, if this is going to be a priority he pushes, but clearly they're moving forward in Cook County with it, and the governor's kind of iffy, opponents saying heck no. The U.S. Supreme Court has a conference today, and we could find out if they're going to take an Illinois case banning firearms on Monday. So we'll definitely be clicking refresh whenever they do that order list at about 8:30 our time on Monday. But today they're going into conference, and one case that they could be dealing with is a challenge to a ban out of Cook County that ultimately wrapped in the Illinois ban. So let's get to that and also look at some of the status of firearms litigation across the state. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning for more here with The Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and get the latest headlines in your inbox. So if you go to the U.S. Supreme Court's website, you will see that they've got their calendar, and the calendar, it shows today green. What is green? It's conference days. And what does that mean? mean? They're going to get together and they're going to discuss whether or not they take certain cases. So today being the 5th, you've got a conference day, but Monday the 8th, you've got argument days set. So you also have order list issuance, and I think on the 8th, as you can see here, we clicked on the 8th, they are going to release an order list at 9:30 their time, that's 8:30 our time, on Monday. And what exactly could they be showing us? Well, we could be seeing the Veramontes case, which has cleared the appeals court after clearing the district court and is now ripe for the U.S. Supreme Court. And back in August, after the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals sided with Cook County on upholding their prohibition of owning certain types of firearms, the plaintiffs in this case, the Veramontes case, they decided to take it to the U.S. Supreme Court. So they filed a writ, and the court then eventually distributed it to conference last month. So again, that conference happening today. So this is the Veramontes case. And we've discussed here a bit about some of the lower court's rationale, essentially indicating that it's not a great record. And that could mean, this is pure speculation. I am not an attorney. I am merely a reporter who's watching this and has been watching this and the trajectory of all of these cases over the past, 2-3 years now, as Illinois had a ban put in place January of 2023, and all the conversation before that in various, municipalities and jurisdictions that were having their own bans, like Deerfield, Naperville being another one. We'll talk about the Beavis case here in a moment. But then, obviously the state enacting the gun ban in January 2023, bringing all kinds of litigation. So the U.S. Supreme Court looking at the Veramontes case, which started before Illinois banned firearms. It was a Cook County-centric case. The lower courts heard that. The appeals court heard it, and then it went off to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's what we're going to see possibly Monday, what the U.S. Supreme Court does. But I wouldn't be surprised if the U.S. Supreme Court says this case isn't ready, and that they point to another case, the Barnett case, that's pending in the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. And people have been asking throughout the week, hey, any updates on the Second Amendment? Well, you've got this case that's still in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals after being heard September 22nd. That's the Barnett case, the case where the district judge sided with the plaintiffs, saying that the law was unconstitutional. Now, what's different between the Barnett case, which has Harrell in it, and the State Rifle Association, and a variety of other groups, 4 different plaintiffs groups all together in this case from the Southern District, where they had a 4-day bench trial in 2024, and the judge there said that the law was unconstitutional, and then goes to the appeals court. Appeals court sat on it for months. The plaintiffs were like, hey, we need some certainty here, because we have a judge saying it's unconstitutional, but you guys aren't doing anything about it, and we're sitting here in limbo. And then the appeals court says, okay, we're going to hear it. The appeals court hears it, and that's where we're at right now with the Barnett case. But it's got a strong record, and some of the court filings throughout all of this in all different cases indicates that seems that they're all waiting for the Barnett case, including the Beavis case, because the Beavis case has a filing back in July that we talked about, where essentially they said that they're going to withhold hearings, and the case shall remain stayed in the district court pending what happens in the Barnett case with the appeals court. And you've got a hearing that's a joint status report that's required in the Beavis case the 15th of this month. So 10 days from now, there will be a status report in the district court of the Beavis case. Now, the Beavis case also coming before Illinois banned firearms statewide. The Beavis case coming out of Naperville with law weapons owner Robert Beavis suing the city of Naperville back in November of 2023, I believe. District court preliminary grounds, there are certain actions that are taken, and then it goes to the appeals court on those preliminary grounds, went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court on preliminary grounds, now it's kicked all the way back to the district court. Beavis eventually wrapping in the challenge to the Illinois law into his case as well, so it's both state and a local challenge that Beavis brought. So we're still waiting on I guess the Barnett case to ultimately come to full fruition out of the appeals court and then go off to the U.S. Supreme Court. How quick is that going to happen? Again, once you're in the appeals court, you've got a 3-judge panel. And that 3-judge panel is what heard the case Barnett v. Raoul back in September. Now, could they, whoever is the one that's defeated in the appeals courts, request an en banc panel of the appeals court? So the entire appeals court, not just the 3-judge panel, but the entire appeals court? It's possible. Will the plaintiffs do that if they lose? They have the option to request that en banc panel, but they also have the option to go right to the U.S. Supreme Court. So is that the trajectory we're on? Or does the appeals court, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, 3-judge panel, side with the plaintiffs on this, and the state has to make that decision? Do we go en banc, which would take more time? Honestly, it would, even if the 3-judge panel makes a ruling and it goes against the states and they uphold the district judge saying it's unconstitutional, you have the state having the option of going en banc. How much more time that would add on to getting this completely dealt with by the U.S. Supreme Court, still uncertain. So a lot of things pending here when it comes to the gun ban challenge. But today, you do have the U.S. Supreme Court going into conference to deal with the Viramontes case. Again, a case that started before Illinois banned firearms. It was challenging the Cook County ban. And that case has been all down the court system. It's out of the appeals court. It's in the U.S. Supreme Court's hands. They will decide, could we find out Monday, if they're going to take that case. So that's where we're at in all of this. And we'll do what we can to keep you updated here with Illinois in Focus Daily, all right? So like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning as we break things down for you and get the headlines in your inbox. Go to thecentersquare.com and sign up for the newsletter today.